Today's episode is actually to go back a little bit here. This show we discuss a lot of different topics, and today's topic, I think we're going to start off with carbon tax. So, just to introduce the roundtable discussion here on who's going to take place in the discussion today. So, I'm going to take place as a moderator. I don't think we're going to take sides, I believe, to my understanding, on the carbon tax, since I think we all have the same opinion, but we're not going to really announce what that is. But on my right today, we have Cullen, which will be one of our debaters, and Kevin's on my left, will be our other debater as well on the carbon tax.
I prefer master debater. Do you mind?
Master debater? Master debater is for both of them.
I'm just a junior debater.
Junior master debater.
Junior debater. All right, to get things underway here, like I said, we might vary off a little bit from the carbon tax because there's a lot of news coming off the press today, so depending on what gets brought to our attention. But let's first start off with the carbon tax. Canada's carbon tax, introduced in 2019 under the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, aims to reduce greenhouse emissions by putting a price on carbon pollution. It started off at $20 per ton and has been increasing annually, reaching $80 per ton in 2024, with plans to rise to $170 per ton by 2030. Wow. I was not ready for that number when I was kind of going through there. That's only 5 years away, but I guess as the state as it is right now, with carbon tax on, well, from a liberal standpoint of view, 8 out of 10 people get more money back than what goes into it. So I guess, do we have the discussion of starting things off as far as, I know, because actually the other day I received my hydro bill, so I kind of mentioned to you. So I received my hydro bill the other day, and I have obviously natural gas, and my carbon tax alone was $50. So, which pretty much doubled I think the thing that I don't know if I was more mad with the carbon tax on top of which doubled the price of my natural gas bill, or the fact I'm paying tax on top of the tax. Yeah. So it was the GST. So I paid taxes, then there's a carbon tax, then there's GST tax on top of carbon tax, which
I don't know how that's legal.
I think that was the part that made me, even though that was the smaller amount, the GST tax on the carbon tax was smaller than the carbon tax. But I think at this point,
wait till your carbon tax is more than your natural gas.
Well, when I look at $170 per ton by 2030, if that was the case, I don't even want to guess what my heating bill would, which in all fairness, we're in Manitoba, obviously very cold temperatures.
Yeah.
Can't live without heating.
Well, you tax booze and we roll with it. You tax even gasoline, right? We roll with the gasoline taxes.
Cigarettes.
Yeah, you tax cigarettes. People can get on. Nobody likes a tax, but you can see the result. Taxes on cigarettes is obviously to get us off taxes, and the carbon tax is kind of put out in the same vein, right? Take away, de-incentivize things that are not good for us. But we're in Canada. Heat is good for us. So where do they get off thinking that it was a good idea to tax what we need to stay warm? I get taxing. You can tax sugar, you can tax nicotine, you can tax booze, you can tax all those things, and I won't cry about it. But if you tax heating my house, I'm going to get a little upset. And if you make it so unaffordable that I have to give up something just to heat my house, well, that's going to have repercussions. And I don't think the Liberals I don't think they thought it all the way through to how emotional we're going to get when you take away a basic necessity like heat.
Well, the thing I always look at too, I know for me personally, I have a natural gas furnace. So I look at my other options, which my only other option at this point to drop the carbon tax would be obviously electric. So I updated my furnace 2 years ago, still natural gas, but I looked at my options as electric, and it was either put baseboards through my entire house, so rewire the whole house, or there is such a thing as electric furnaces, but the price on them is just unreasonable. And, for me to pay, I don't think it would ever pay for itself back again, paying double the price on a furnace. And I don't know from the discussion I had with my plumber that was installing it, he just said, I asked him, has many people switched over to electric heat? And he kind of said, well, it's not really it's an option, but not many people are switching to that option at this point because of the price, and they don't know really exactly what's required for these furnaces. So
Yeah, and so the worst part is you want to do your part. You want to help out the environment. You want to burn less fossil fuels, but there's a barrier in the way in the form of a huge price increase that, of course, everyone has to work out their own financial situation. So a lot of people look at the numbers and go, I just can't make this switch right now. It's the same thing with EVs. I'd love to drive an EV. There's no way I can afford one. So I don't have one.
right.
But the intent is there, and people, I believe, will make healthier choices for the environment. But of course, the numbers have to add up, and until they do, it's just not a workable solution. And so for the government to come in and strong arm us by saying, I know it costs a lot of money, so what we're going to do is we're going to make it cost even more not to spend that money. And that's just a lose-lose situation for every Canadian and any political party. I don't know how they're going to move forward past this, because it's the anger, as you said. We're between now and 2030, we're just going to get more upset and more upset. And, maybe the Liberals have decided we're not going to cross a tipping point. It remains to be seen, right? Who knows what the future holds?
My thoughts exactly. No. Yeah, it's a tricky thing, because I think regardless of what your political affiliation is, I think most people, if the clean option was available, like if people wanted to drive an EV or just a hybrid, or if they wanted an electric furnace or geothermal, whatever, I think a vast majority of people, they would take it. People want to do better for the environment, but there are barriers that stand in front of us that, for example, because I think, the cleaner options are more expensive, but yet it's hard to save for it when you slap a tax that's just draining our pockets. So it's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, well, necessities have to be reclassified. There's luxuries and there's necessities. And if you want to tax luxuries, I think a lot of people could grudgingly absorb it. Now, if you want to tax necessities, that's a whole different part of the brain. And it's part of the brain you really don't want to mess with, because once we collectively decide that we're not being treated very well, there's a good chance somebody's going to say something. And, we might not have the reach of other prominent speakers. But once enough speakers get on board, speakers like CBC and CTV, and these names, once they start getting off of the message that's dictated to them and start actually reporting what is going on and what's happening, like if they were to come to your door and go over your bill and report that, it would be truthful, factual, informative, and information we could use. And then I suspect that it would hasten the lack of public support for a carbon tax. And a lot of people that support carbon tax are probably the ones that aren't looking at your home heating bills like you are. And it's really good to have you here, because you're here with bringing us actual relevant information. You're a Manitoba home trying to stay warm in the winter, looking at their bill and going, this doesn't add up. This doesn't make sense. Why isn't the rest of the country screaming about this? And that's because the media isn't doing their job. And it's so much fun to be on a media show where we are doing our job. We are actually looking at the information being provided to us, and we're spreading that message as far as we can, right?
Well, I think the one big, and as you mentioned there, I think a very valuable point would be, I look at my bill and I look at other options, but if there was some type of incentive saying, we want you to switch to electric heat, okay, is there some incentives for that? If I was to get maybe 25% off of electric furnace or something, maybe it would make it more, something that might be something I could consider. But if everything's double the price and the longevity of a furnace now is not near what it used to be. Once you get a furnace at one time, used to last us pretty much a lifetime, but now they make pretty much furnaces so they last maybe 10 years at most.
And using your example to make much of a point as I can, You know, if they just tweaked the carbon tax a little bit and said, you know what, every dollar we make off this carbon tax, we're going to use it to offset your electricity bill. So that, yeah, you pay a little bit here, but you get a little bit there too. But that incentivizes the electric furnaces and all of the electric components that we need. But that wasn't what they did with carbon tax. It's just a pool of slush money that they can do with whatever they want. They needed to earmark that, and then people needed to see the carbon tax on their fossil bill and the carbon credit on their electric bill. And then we could look at it and go, okay, we're not being ripped off. I get it. I see the minus, I see the plus. It makes sense in my brain. A lot less controversial if you start framing it that way than it is with, yeah, we need more money, so we're going to tax what you need the most and run with the money, and who knows where it goes and what it does. I don't know if any Canadian can get on board with that level of mismanagement, is basically what it boils down to.
I don't even think that the carbon tax, I think, is a true attempt to fight climate change. I think it's, for as much as they claim it's to help fight climate change in their eyes, I think it's as much as just a tax, just so that they can keep racking up huge amounts of deficit spending, which they've, if that was their goal, mission accomplished.
Yeah, bravo.
Mission accomplished.
Well, you can tax people to death so they try and reduce their heat and gas. Sure, you'll reduce your emissions, but I don't think that's the proper way of reducing your emissions. If we keep taxing them, hopefully it'll turn your thermostat down a little bit more, because obviously people are trying to save us every cent that they can. So, you know, whether you try and reduce your heat or you know, obviously the large landmass that we live in Canada, most people require some type of transportation to get back and forth to work. So sure, maybe they won't drive as much, which might reduce a little bit of emissions. Like from what I heard, the biggest reduction in emissions was during COVID.
Yeah.
Well, boy,
That's because no one went outside.
no one was allowed to leave home. So of course that would reduce your emissions. That's a fair assumption to say that during COVID that, yeah, our emissions certainly came down. Well, yeah, it's
They obviously
during the
want us at
pandemic.
home scrolling through TikTok.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Fear mongering.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are ways that you can reduce the amount of heat that you do use. Like, for example, like at my house, like we take like cling wrap and you tape it to the edge of your windows to help retain heat better. You know, you might put some things like at the base of your door to prevent cold air from coming in. Like, there are ways that you can help save some money, but you know, kind of just jumping back to, like, you know, how cold it gets around here. I know the Liberal Party is not ignorant or stupid to the fact, but it's almost as if they kind of thought that all of Canada has the same amount, or sorry, like has a similar climate to what you would have in Toronto or Vancouver, where it doesn't get that cold. Sure, they might get like a little bit of snow, but like, you know, -30 is almost like an expected given in like Alberta, Saskatchewan, Canada, the territories. But yet everywhere else, it's more
So
temperate.
you're saying the prairie provinces are getting the shaft. That's what you're
Well, I think,
boiling down to here.
well, Alberta and Saskatchewan have, I mean, well, when you look at like with like the resource-based like economics with the carbon tax, like Saskatchewan and Alberta are just getting slammed right in the face with it. So it's, yeah. And I mean, they did allow provinces to set their own carbon pricing, but if it doesn't reach the goal, then they have to abide by it federally.
Right.
So
Yeah. Well, yeah, they definitely incentivized what they wanted. Like, but of course, what would you expect them to do? It's just sad that the prairie provinces don't have the clout. You know, they don't have Senate clout. They don't have House Commons clout. They just
or
don't.
the population.
Yeah,
clout.
they don't have the population clout. So we just kind of roll over whatever Toronto and Vancouver decide.
And Montreal.
Well, yeah. Yeah, no doubt.
I've seen some things in Southeast Asia, I believe, where they have in one of the countries they have a system where they burn trash like underground, and then they use the energy generated from it to just use as electricity for the city. So I think there are several markets that you could use in these ways to reduce landfill sizes, or, you know, tarp things over with methane or burn it somehow safely. But I don't know. We're kind of dragging our heels on it. We're kind of just carbon taxing everything. And that's the thing. It's like a lack of action, and we rather just kind of like how we've talked about before, just slap a tax on it and then just go, well, we've done our part.
I think you're talking about knee-jerk reaction versus planning and moving in a focused direction, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly what isn't happening, and so now we're left with with knee-jerk reactions to all of the problems that arise. You know, I suspect that if Canada was more on top of its game, a lot of the negative effects of our international relations might be softened, i.e. tariffs for one. And I think it's just a lack of planning on our part. When I spoke with the mayor of Brandon recently, he talked about in being curious about road technologies that would survive the fluctuating temperatures better. And he's looking to Europe because that's exactly what they're doing in Europe. They have similar climates, similar problems, and they have different solutions. So if they're doing something different, why aren't we at least investigating something different? Because the current road, solution is to patch and wait.
Yeah.
And as the climate, unfortunately, Manitoba is seeing Chinooks in January now. You know, I don't remember that as a kid, but it's happening. We're getting plus temperatures, even if it's just for a couple of days. It just destroys our roads because our roads aren't built to handle. They're built to go straight into freezing and stay there until they come straight back out for summer. And using other countries, learning off of other countries how they're managing their road systems. That's something that we should be all over, and I don't see it. Because just the other day, there's a guy in a dump truck, and he's got a shovel full of asphalt, and he's just filling the holes and moving on. But we all know that's a Band-Aid solution because we've been through it.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, just with the whole kind of fighting climate change, I really feel like the best way, I think, for tackling it is finding that solution where I think businesses and, these technology companies that develop these ways of improving the roads or improving carbon capture technology or finding ways to deal with the methane at the landfills, fill in the blank. Yeah. But I think that there really should be some sort of incentive or boost maybe from the government to help increase the competition between these companies to come up with ever increasingly better solutions. Yeah, because I think just, the faster that we can be more competitive with finding these solutions, well, less knee-jerk reaction, and we can actually do actual results when we just go full steam ahead and just trying to find the best solutions just time after time after time.
Well, it's interesting. We have the vehicle technology that's evolving that a car pretty much will almost drive itself now, but we can't find a way to fill a pothole so that it...
Yeah.
If we wait long enough, pretty soon cars won't need roads, they'll just fly, so we don't need to, maybe that's the end game.
That's our strategy. Yeah. Wait for flying cars.
Wait for flying cars, and then roads are a thing of the past. We don't have to worry about it anymore.
Phew, that was close.
But think about it, just how much of the budget that we could save without having to spend on roads if we just had flying cars.
Oh yeah, flying cars are going to be awesome. I can't wait. But you do bring up a good point.
Like this is going to happen in like 3 years.
I kind of get excited about flying cars now too.
Yeah. Is that Santa or my taxi on the roof? I'm not sure. But you did bring up a good point. Innovation is something that I suspect, sadly, might not be Canada's strongest suit. And the example is... let's go back to EVs, actually. EVs represented a huge level of innovation that nobody was really looking at. Tesla drove the market on that. Everyone else is playing catch up. And basically the conclusion of what we're talking about is, wouldn't it be nice if Canada was leading the charge, leading the innovation in something? We did it, the Canadarm on the space shuttle. We did have an innovation. We do have a history of innovation and scientific prowess, aero and aeronautics prowess. But slowly, somehow, all of these skills, they seem to disappear from the country. They're probably all going to the States because that's where the money is. wouldn't it be nice if we could hang on to some of our talent and
Or bring people back.
yeah, or even bring them back, right? That would be even better. There's a lot of Canadians living in America, and boy, oh boy, that's how we would know Canada was doing something right. If you saw a flood of expats coming back, because man, things really got straightened out around here. I'm so glad to be back. Wouldn't that be a feel-good story, eh?
It would be like, that's another thing that would make you feel almost patriotic as a Canadian,
Yeah.
like we were saying before. So,
Well, the one thing that, as we discussed about a lot of the topics we're talking about is electricity. So we're talking about electric furnaces, electric cars, everything all electric. In the grand scheme of things, what is, if everybody switches to electric, obviously you have to have the grid, the power and everything to provide all the power for these vehicles and for electricity. If everybody switched from natural gas to, electric furnaces, electric vehicles, where's that all the electricity coming from?
I have good news to report on that front.
Oh, okay.
Well, with Trump's tariffs, they're not buying any more of our electricity, so we got loads of electricity
Lots of
now.
power is what you're saying. Okay.
I'll be honest. I'm a big pusher of nuclear, of nuclear energy. It generates a crap ton for very little, and it leaves very little waste. And they're finding ways to recycle already spent nuclear fuel. That's awesome. Yeah. But I think because I think the number one detractor, unfortunately, of nuclear is people's fear about nuclear because of the Fukushima disaster and Chernobyl. Yeah. But I think a lot of that fear comes from people who are not informed. Really, I think ill-informed people might fear that type of thing, and I don't know. Just read on it. It is incredibly safe. And there's not enough time for me to start ranting about it. But.
Well, I'll give you a comparison because it's hard to, you'd like to compare likes with likes. So if you added up the total number of people that have been killed by nuclear fallout, Fukushimas and Chernobyls and 3 Mile Islands, and you add up all of those casualties, because there were some casualties, but they don't even compare to the number of people that have died in coal mines. Not yes. Even it's not even a like it's minuscule.
Or have their lifespans been dramatically reduced because of inhaling all those chemicals.
Oh yeah, and I'm not 100% nuclear because I don't trust our safety. Our safety people to make sure that they don't cut corners, because it's all about margins. If we don't make our 10% margin, we go bankrupt. Well, where are we going to find our margin? Well, usually it's in safety, and nuclear is one of those industries that has to be regulated for that exact purpose. And I'm not sure that we have a track record of safety, although we did make the CANDU reactor a very safe reactor, so safe in fact that we sell it to the world, or we used to at one point. I'm not sure recent. But I'd counter the nuclear argument with just a slight twist. Fission is becoming fusion, and fusion technology, I don't know if you've heard of a tokamak reactor. A tokamak reactor is basically the goal of creating a mini sun and then containing that sun. And the challenge of it was you can't hold on to anything that hot. How do you put the hottest thing in the world in a box? Well, your box is gone. So what they've been doing is experimenting with different levels of magnetic containment, of course, different material technology to try and hold the sun. And when they first started it, they could turn it on for like a millisecond, and that's it, before something got too hot, because everything is temperature sensitive. They could run it for a millisecond, but then they could run it for 2 milliseconds, and then they ran it for 10 milliseconds. And then they got up to a second, and that was a massive breakthrough. If you can run it for minutes.
When did they start this? Do you remember?
This is about 20 years ago that the technology was thought up, but they've been working steadily. They've been trying different approaches. One approach was to, because the goal is to create a miniature sun, and they've used laser beams, focused laser beams, but they focus them all on the same point and then put so much power behind it that it should blow up anything. But because all of the lasers are focused on one point and that point is carefully shielded, it hasn't taken off as well as the tokamak design. But it's an interesting proposal. What I mean to say is this is actually one area that Canada is trying to innovate, because they're the ones that came up with the focused lasers. Whether it works remains to be seen. But what is newsworthy is that they're into the minute level of these tokamak reactors. And once you get into the minutes, boy, hours aren't far away, right? And this promises the generating capability of nuclear without any of the nuclear byproducts. There's no waste. Once you turn it off, the sun just goes away and everything cools off, and you can walk around it and, polish it up for the next run. So it's a cleaner technology. Obviously, there are hurdles to overcome. So whether I would jump into nuclear, considering that a nuclear power plant is a 20-year build, or maybe not a 20-year build, but it's a long-term project. Maybe we might get lucky. Maybe fusion will come online, or be so close to becoming online that it'll be worth waiting for. And it has a lot of potential and a lot of promise.
So you don't really have to wait for daytime to see the sun. You can just go to your local fusion reactor and go see a miniature one.
The suntans would be incredible.
Oh, at a fine point. You just get like a little dot right on your on your wrist.
Yeah, sounds like a new inventive way for heating your home type of thing.
Well, they hope that it'll revolutionize the price of electricity such that electricity will, for all intents and purposes, be free. And the reason that is a good business model is if you follow crypto at all, heavily dependent on electricity for generating it basically generates the currency. But a huge amount of electricity required to do all of that math, because it's searching for numbers that can't exist. Well, not can't exist, obviously, but numbers that are so hard to decipher that it would take us a supercomputer to decipher it. So if you have the number, you can go, well, I've got the supercomputed calculated number that nobody else is going to get. I'm just going to keep it in my back pocket, and we'll call it $5. Whatever the price of it is, it fluctuates. But that costs a huge amount of computing resources. Iceland is a good example. They have geothermal heat at such a overwhelming quantity that they can't use it all. So guess who moved in? The crypto guys. They're setting up their with essentially free electricity and generating cryptocurrencies in Iceland. And I don't know. We have geothermal here. We have a lot more resources, and we have a lot more civilization. I shouldn't call it civilization, but us compared to Iceland, there's definitely an infrastructure difference. Would have been nice if we had developed geothermal a little bit more, but like the problem, like we were talking earlier, the most expensive technology might be the best for us, but if you can't afford it, well, how useful is it?
Right. Yeah.
We thank you very much for watching today's debate about the federal carbon tax. Until next time, we will see you then.